All right, let's dive in. Today, we're going deep on something pretty interesting, a little unsettling maybe, but definitely interesting. We're going to be looking at how male pattern baldness is presented online,
Okay.
specifically by websites promoting the drug Propecia.
All right.
So, we've got 8 popular websites that we've been looking at, and we're really trying to break down the language and imagery they use. It's almost like a behind-the-scenes look at how marketing can shape how we think about something as natural as losing your hair, you know?
Yeah. It's really about creating a narrative, a story that these websites want you to believe about hair loss and its supposed solutions.
So it's not just like medical information.
Yeah.
It's like a whole marketing strategy.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes sense. One thing that I noticed right away was just the language. It felt very clinical, almost like they were trying to frame hair loss as like this serious medical condition.
Yeah, definitely. You see a lot of terms like androgenetic alopecia instead of just saying male pattern baldness
Right.
or even deficient hair replacement.
Oh, wow.
That word deficient implies that there's like a correct amount of hair and anything less is a failure.
Yeah.
It's all very deliberate.
Yeah, and I noticed that they constantly mention studies linking hair loss to low self-esteem, depression, even social stigma.
Yeah.
It almost creates this sense of urgency, like fear around something that is, for a lot of men, a very natural part of aging.
Yeah. I think they're tapping into those insecurities, those societal pressures that tell men they need a full head of hair to be attractive, successful. And by doing that, they're essentially creating a problem that they then offer to solve with their product.
That's a really good point. Like they're framing it as a problem that needs to be fixed, but it's not just the words, right? I mean, the visuals are also playing a huge role here. Did you notice the contrast, the stark contrast in how they depict men with hair and men without hair?
Oh, absolutely. The images of men with hair loss are often isolated. They're gazing away from the viewer. Sometimes they're shown only as heads in diagrams, like the Norwood-Hamilton scale.
Right. Which, by the way, is a standardized scale for classifying the extent and pattern of male pattern baldness.
Okay.
It's often used to track hair loss progression and to determine the suitability of different treatment options.
And I think that that scale is interesting
Yeah.
because it quantifies something that's naturally so varied,
Right.
you know? And those images, they often look sad or even ashamed. It's like they're being portrayed as less than somehow.
Exactly. And then you have the images of men with full heads of hair. They're smiling, they're confident, they're surrounded by friends. They look incredibly successful.
Yeah.
It's a classic visual binary that reinforces the idea that hair loss equals isolation and unhappiness, while a full head of hair equals happiness and social acceptance.
It's like that Propecia ad, the one with the guy on the beach, standing alone, staring out at the ocean.
Oh, yes.
Remember the tagline? Save the hair. It almost feels like a cry for help.
It really does.
Yeah. It's as if they're saying hair loss is like a threat that has to be overcome. And by framing it this way, they're making men feel like they need to take action to fight against something that's completely natural.
Okay, so I get the whole like creating a problem to sell a solution thing, but what about the science? Because they do, reference studies, they explain how DHT works. It's like they're trying to be informative too.
Yeah, of course, they're leveraging the appearance of scientific backing to support their claims.
Okay.
DHT, or dihydrotestosterone, is a hormone that plays a role in male pattern baldness. And these sites explain how DHT leads to the miniaturization of hair follicles, using terms like anagen phase, that's the active growth phase of hair follicles, and potent metabolite. But have you noticed how they sometimes simplify it to the point of like demonizing DHT?
Yeah, like calling it a hair growth killer. It sounds almost like a villain in a comic book.
Exactly. They want to make DHT memorable as the enemy that needs to be defeated, which makes Propecia, which blocks DHT, seem like the hero. But there's more to the story.
Hold on. If they're using science to sell Propecia, are they being selective? Are there studies they aren't mentioning? Because I know DHT has other functions in the body, right?
That's a great question, and one we should definitely explore further. DHT is a naturally occurring androgen. It's a type of hormone that plays a role in male sexual development and other bodily functions. While blocking DHT may help with hair loss, it could have other unintended consequences. And these websites often gloss over that complexity.
So they're focusing on a very specific aspect of DHT, the one that fits their narrative. It's like cherry-picking the science to make their point. It's fascinating and a little concerning.
It is. Yeah,
Yeah.
it definitely highlights the importance of critical thinking, especially when you're dealing with online health information.
This reminds me of like those old muscle building ads I used to see as a kid. It made me feel like I was scrawny and inadequate.
Right.
And it's that same pressure, right, to fix something that's not necessarily broken.
Exactly. And I think it speaks to a larger societal issue.
Yeah.
We live in a culture that's obsessed with youth, perfection, control.
Yeah.
We're constantly bombarded with messages about how to improve ourselves, how to look younger, how to achieve some idealized version of masculinity.
But shouldn't we like be questioning those messages?
Yeah.
What if instead of trying to fight hair loss, we reframed it as a natural part of life, something to be accepted rather than resisted?
That's a really interesting thought experiment.
Yeah.
What if we embraced the natural changes that come with aging?
Yeah.
What if we focused on our overall health and well-being
Right.
rather than fixating on one specific physical attribute? I think it would be incredibly liberating.
I think you're right. It would require a real shift in mindset, both individually and societally.
Yeah.
But it'd be worth it. Speaking of societal pressures, it seems like these websites are promoting a very specific image of masculinity too, one that equates a full head of hair with strength and virility.
Absolutely. They're playing into those traditional notions of masculinity. These can be incredibly limiting and even harmful,
Yeah.
especially for young men who are still trying to figure out who they are.
Yeah, and those expectations can be so unrealistic. Not everyone is going to have like a thick, full head of hair their entire lives.
Exactly.
And that's okay.
There's so much diversity in how men look,
Yeah.
and that's something to be celebrated, not shamed.
Mm.
And these websites are pushing a very narrow and often outdated definition of masculinity.
And you know what else I found interesting? How they push self-diagnosis. Like they have all these quizzes and questionnaires, often using the Norwood Hamilton scale, which, as you explained, is a visual guide to the stages of male pattern baldness.
Right, right.
It seems empowering at first, right?
Yeah.
You're taking control of your health, getting informed.
Yeah.
But they're subtly steering you towards a specific conclusion
Okay.
that you need their product, like that example from the Keep Hair script. It provides questions to ask your doctor, but they're all leading questions designed to make you think you need Propecia.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It creates a sense of urgency and bypasses the nuance of a proper medical consultation. And the Norwood Hamilton scale itself, while it can be useful in some contexts, can be misleading.
Okay.
It doesn't consider all the factors that can contribute to hair loss, like genetics, stress, diet, or underlying medical conditions.
Right. It makes it seem like everyone's hair loss follows this predictable pattern, which just isn't true. It oversimplifies a complex issue.
And that simplification can lead to unnecessary anxiety and self-doubt. It's important to remember that the Norwood Hamilton scale is just one tool, and it shouldn't be used in isolation to make decisions about your health.
It's almost like they're trying to convince you that you have a problem before you even talk to a doctor.
Precisely. And that leads to another interesting point, how they use science, or at least the appearance of science, to market their products.
Oh, yeah, the whole DHT thing. They make it sound like DHT is public enemy number one.
They present it as the root of all hair loss evil. But it's not that simple. DHT is a vital hormone for men. It's essential for development and other bodily functions. Blocking it can have side effects that these websites often downplay.
So they're highlighting the negative aspects of DHT while ignoring its positive roles. That seems misleading, to say the least.
It's selective storytelling designed to support their marketing goals.
Right.
And it underscores the importance of doing your own research and talking to a qualified healthcare professional before making any decisions about treatment.
This whole discussion is making me think about how we frame health and aging in general. These websites medicalize a natural process, making it seem like a disease that needs to be cured.
It's part of a broader trend, unfortunately. We're seeing it with everything from menopause to wrinkles to, like you said, male pattern baldness. Things that are perfectly natural are being presented as problems that require medical intervention.
And that creates a culture of anxiety and insecurity. Like it makes us feel like we're not good enough as we are.
It's so important to challenge those messages and to remember that aging is a natural and beautiful process. We don't need to fight it. We can embrace it.
Speaking of challenging messages, I noticed something else about the imagery on these websites. The contrast between the photos of men with hair loss and those with full heads of hair it's almost cartoonish.
It's very deliberate. The men experiencing hair loss are often shown in shadows, looking downcast or even ashamed. The images focus on their scalps, their receding hairlines. It's almost dehumanizing.
And then you have the men with full heads of hair. They're bathed in sunlight, smiling broadly, looking incredibly vibrant and successful.
It reinforces a visual stereotype that plays into our deepest insecurities. They're not just selling a product, they're selling an image,
Yeah.
an ideal that's often unattainable and, frankly, unrealistic.
It's like they're saying, this is what a real man looks like, and if you're losing your hair, you're falling short.
It's a really powerful message, and one that can have a real impact on men's self-esteem and body image.
It's important to remember that beauty comes in all forms, and that hair loss doesn't define a man's worth or attractiveness. It's just one aspect of who he is.
Exactly. And there are plenty of men who are confident and attractive, regardless of how much hair they have.
Yeah, it's like they're taking something that's so normal, natural, and turning it into this like source of shame and insecurity.
And that's where the real danger lies.
Yeah, yeah.
It's not just about selling a product. It's about shaping our perceptions of ourselves
Right.
and what we consider to be normal or acceptable.
And it seems like they're preying on, those who are already feeling vulnerable.
Of course.
Men who might be experiencing hair loss for the first time or who are, already kind of struggling with their self-esteem.
Absolutely. They're targeting those who are most likely to be swayed by these messages of fear and inadequacy.
Yeah. This whole deep dive has really been eye-opening. It makes you realize how much marketing is going on beneath the surface, even when it comes to something like losing your hair.
It's everywhere, really.
Mm.
We're constantly being bombarded with messages about what's wrong with us and what we need to buy to fix it. It's important to be aware of those messages and to develop a critical eye.
So we've uncovered a lot about the tactics these websites use. The clinical language, the visual rhetoric, the self-diagnosis traps, the selective use of science. But what's the main takeaway? What do we want our listener to walk away with?
I think the most important thing is to remember that you have the power to choose how you feel about yourself. Don't let marketing messages dictate your self-worth. Hair loss is a natural part of life for many men, and it doesn't have to define you.
And if you are concerned about hair loss, talk to, a doctor you trust. Get real information, not just marketing spin. There are options out there, but the choice is ultimately yours.
Absolutely. Don't feel pressured to conform to some idealized image of masculinity.
Hmm.
Embrace who you are, hair loss or not. True confidence comes from within, not from a bottle of pills or a full head of hair.
Beautifully said. So until our next deep dive, keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep those BS detectors on high alert.
And remember, you're not alone. Hair loss is a common experience, and there's no shame in it. Embrace your individuality and rock what you've got.